never been to school before. I've never had friends. It's all sort of new to me.
And now I'll show you how I got from this to that. This video is solely going to showcase the background, and in the next video I'll be posting how I animated it, so stay tuned for that. I do not own the soundtrack, dialogue, characters, or anything belonging to Zag and the Miraculous team. This is strictly a fan-made reanimated scene from Miraculous Ladybug. When making your own original backgrounds, if your characters are going to frequently interact with their environment, or if it's a place that they will continuously come back to, then there should definitely be more attention to how the background is designed. Having separate props and certain pieces in separate layers would be a huge help. Even little details in the room can make a huge difference. You must consider to what degree your characters are going to interact with their environment. For this particular animation, there was no need for me to separate the background from the foreground and the middle ground, but in other instances, there may be. I didn't put as much detail into the background considering that everything is pretty distant from the characters, and also since the main focus here would be on Mr. Adrien Agreste. The outlines here are something I used solely for my own reference to block out the base colors, and because Mr. Adrien Agreste here is outlined, I felt it would help create more contrast if the background didn't share those same outlines, and it also helps the background feel farther away. You wouldn't be able to see any definite outlines if those buildings are really that far away. And it does help create this more realistic look that's similar to how the 3D animation looks. Over the years, I've been forced to make more and more backgrounds for different projects. Is it supposed to be a thing that grows on you, or is it just one of those things where no matter how many times you do it, you can't really ever fully enjoy it? Like, maybe if I practiced drawing in perspective more often, I'd enjoy it? Or maybe it's because I'm not really the type of artist who draws with a lot of details on my characters. I typically approach everything with an animator mindset, leaving less details that need to be animated later on. So having backgrounds that are very intricate, although they're beautiful to look at, and I highly admire people who can make them, I just can't stand drawing them. Even with perspective, I tend to make my backgrounds with some curved lines that technically break the laws of reality. But I mean, it's an animated world, it doesn't have to perfectly be angular and realistic, right? But I suppose that's more of a stylistic thing. My favorite part of this background was definitely making the sky with all of those pretty blues. Seeing them all together and having them blended is just so satisfying. And I left a hazy white outline around the building structures because I don't know if you've ever seen it, but sometimes rain has that misty look to it during storms once it hits the ground. And just adding that kind of just gives the effect, maybe the idea that the rain is really hitting on those surfaces, even if it's not actually animated. This is probably the closest I'll ever get to painting decently because I'm terrible at painting, like traditional painting. Regardless of the number of painting kits I've received for Christmas from just about everyone, I'm still a complete amateur if you hand me a paintbrush and a palette. Digital painting is just easier for me. I don't have to worry about using any water, like with watercolor paints, and I don't have to worry about letting anything dry before I can put a new layer. And I'm always running out of white paint. always. Ugh, and paint is just so expensive. And another thing, for instance, in this background, I was able to leave the foreground and middle ground in focus while the background was blurred out, which literally took me like 3 seconds to add a blur effect to it, versus maybe me trying to get that look in a traditional way. I'm not even sure how I would approach that. So to me, it's just easier digitally. But regardless of how hard digital software tries to imitate a paintbrush kind of look, I feel that it's never as good as the actual thing. Paint creates such a unique look that can't be completely replicated by anything digital. And getting the hang of digital painting could also be tricky if you're used to creating art traditionally. I know it took me a while to get used to using a drawing tablet at first, but over time it gets easier. But some people really just prefer drawing traditionally. I mean, I still sketch, my initial sketches on paper before transferring them digitally. For the trees, I painted little individual patches and then blended them to give it more of a multi-layered, textured feel to it, along with using a textured brush. Okay, one last thing. Because this is a miraculous themed video, I want to know, if you can hold any miraculous, which would it be? I think I'd pick the snake miraculous. Not only because I'm in love with Luca, but because having the power of second chance would honestly be pretty sweet. Now, I mean, in all honesty, having a frog miraculous would be most appropriate for me, being that I am known as the girl who really loves frogs. Man, one time I saw this edit of Adrian with a frog miraculous, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I should totally draw myself with a frog miraculous. But then again, I probably just look a lot like Asui from My Hero Academia. Probably won't be anything interesting to see there. I wonder what the transformation words for a frog miraculous would be. Hop on? Let's hop. Let's leap. The more I talk about this, the more I want to actually animate it. Maybe that could be a future video. Would you like to see me do more background related videos? Maybe I can do a video explaining some tips on how I approach backgrounds when I have to do them. Things that could make drawing a background a little more easy and more enjoyable. Let me know what you think. Have a totally awesome day, and I'll see you next time.